January 1797. The war in northern Italy drags into a second winter. The snows have fallen thick across the mountains of Lombardy, and the great fortress city of Mantua still stands, a defiant island of Austrian power amid the rising tide of French victory. For 9 long months, Mantua has been under siege. Inside its walls, disease and hunger have done what cannon could not. 9,000 men are already dead. The survivors, pale, hollow-eyed and starving, live on horse meat, rats and stray dogs. But even that will not last much longer. Outside the walls, the army of Italy, under General Napoleon Bonaparte, is little better off. His troops are unpaid, barefoot, their uniforms in rags, their faces drawn from hunger and exhaustion. They have marched and fought without rest for nearly a year, and now, amid frost and mud, they wait for the final Austrian attempt to break the siege. In his field report to Paris, Napoleon writes bitterly, "The hospitals lack everything. Our wounded lie on bare floors in the most miserable state of destitution." It is not just the wounded who suffer. The living, too, are close to collapse. But Bonaparte knows that morale is as vital as ammunition. He moves among his men, speaking softly, listening to their complaints, reminding them why they fight, for the Republic, for glory, for France. Across the snow-covered Alps, the Austrians prepare one last throw of the dice. Their emperor demands that Mantua be relieved, or that his army die trying. Field Marshal Alvinzi, still smarting from his defeat at Arcole, has been given 14,000 fresh troops and strict orders: save Mantua at all costs. But he faces the same enemy as before: the weather, the mountains, and Napoleon. In early January, the Austrian columns begin their march. Their plan is ambitious. 6 separate forces will advance through the snow and converge at Rivoli, cutting off Bonaparte's northern flank and smashing the siege from behind. But the terrain is merciless. The peaks of Monte Baldo rise 7,000 feet high, their paths buried under ice and snow. Men collapse from exhaustion. Horses freeze where they stand. On the right flank, General Lusignan's column, ordered to cross the mountains and fall on the French rear, loses 200 men before even sighting the enemy. Alvinzi's plan, conceived in the comfort of warm headquarters, is already disintegrating in the cold. Meanwhile, Napoleon is far to the south, in the Papal States, pressuring the Pope to cease his resistance to the Republic. He believes the Austrian army will need weeks to regroup. But suddenly, reports arrive from the north. Enemy columns on the move, outposts under attack, cavalry sightings near the Adige River. Napoleon wastes no time. He rides north through sleet and darkness, back to his headquarters in Rovarbella. By the time he arrives, the Austrian offensive has begun in earnest, and the battle that will decide the fate of Italy is about to unfold. On the French front line stands General Joubert, a young commander of only 27, brave, modest, and fiercely loyal. His division, barely 10,000 strong, holds the approaches to Rivoli, a small plateau overlooking the Adige Valley. Joubert's scouts report multiple enemy columns approaching, and he sends a message to Bonaparte. "The enemy will make every effort to throw me onto the blockade of Mantua." Napoleon reads the message, then calmly writes his reply: Hold Rivoli at all costs. Help is on the way. That night, as moonlight glimmers on the snow, Bonaparte arrives at Rivoli in person. He and Joubert climb the ridges above the plateau, and from there they see the enemy's campfires burning across the valley, 1,000 flickering lights stretching from Lake Garda to the Adige River. Napoleon turns to his officers and says quietly, "Gentlemen, tomorrow will be decisive." The army is cold, hungry, and outnumbered more than 2 to 1, but the men trust their general. They have seen him pull victory from the jaws of disaster before, and they will follow him again into the frozen dawn of Rivoli.
January 14th, 1797. Dawn breaks over the Rivoli Plateau, turning the frozen Adige Valley into a sea of pale gold and smoke. The snow crunches under boots, and the air is thick with the smell of frost and gunpowder. On the ridges above, Napoleon's men prepare for battle. They are outnumbered, 10,000 French against more than 30,000 Austrians. But they hold the high ground, and their general has returned. Bonaparte studies the terrain through his spyglass. Below him, 6 Austrian columns crawl through the fog, moving like gray serpents across the white plain. To his aides, he says quietly, "They are brave, but they are blind. They march to their destruction." At 7 a.m., the battle begins. A thunderclap of cannon fire rolls through the valley. Flames burst from the Austrian guns near Montebaldo, their echoes bouncing off the cliffs like thunder in a cathedral. French drums answer, rolling through the icy air. From every ridge and ravine, smoke rises in thick gray columns. The valley of Rivoli becomes a cauldron of fire and noise. Joubert's men, thin, hungry, exhausted, fight like demons. Bayonets flash white against the snow. Smoke covers the ridges. Every volley echoes through the mountains like the heartbeat of war itself. Napoleon rides from post to post, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold your fire until you see their faces. Stand firm, you fight for France." He moves as if guided by instinct, placing artillery on the heights above San Marco, sending reinforcements to wherever the line wavers. In every direction, the Austrians attack, and in every direction, he answers. From the east, Quasdanovich's division pushes hard up the slopes. The snow turns red beneath their boots. Drums echo, trumpets blare. The entire mountain trembles under the clash of muskets and cannon. By mid-morning, the valley is shrouded in smoke. Sunlight glimmers through drifting clouds of powder. French guns roar from the plateau, raining fire onto the columns below. On the right flank, Massena's troops drive back the Austrians at Montecerredo, fighting hand-to-hand among frozen rocks and fallen trees. The French shout, "Vive la République!" Their breath mixes with gun smoke. Bayonets gleam like shards of ice. But on the left, the situation turns desperate. General Lusignan's column, marching from the mountains, has reached the French rear. Joubert's men are surrounded. Snow whirls in violent gusts as the Austrians attack from two sides. For a moment, defeat seems inevitable. Napoleon sees the danger. He gallops toward the center, his cloak snapping in the wind, his face set in stone. "We strike where they are strongest. We break them here or we die here." He orders Massena to pivot right, attacking the Austrians head-on in the valley. Then he summons Colonel Leclerc's artillery, 6 cannon dragged by horses up the cliffs, their wheels wrapped in chains to keep from slipping on ice. At 10 a.m., the guns are in position. Napoleon raises his hand. A single shout, "Fire!" The volley tears through the valley. A wall of flame and thunder smashes into the Austrian columns. The explosion reverberates across the snowfields, and the enemy line begins to waver. From the heights of Rivoli, the French charge downhill. Drums pound, bugles scream, bayonets flash through smoke and wind. The White Valley becomes a storm of red and black. Men fight knee-deep in snow, slipping on ice slick with blood. The noise is deafening, a single, endless roar. By noon, Napoleon stands at the edge of the plateau, watching the chaos below. The Austrians are faltering, their columns are broken, their guns scattered, their courage spent. He lowers his spyglass, his expression unreadable. "Now," he says quietly, "we finish it."
Late morning, January 14th, 1797. The Battle of Rivoli hangs in the balance. The valley is burning, the snow blackened by cannon smoke. Every ridge echoes with the cries of men and horses. The Austrian army, pressing from 6 directions, seems ready to crush the exhausted French against the cliffs of the Adige. Napoleon's position is desperate. His left is buckling, his right nearly encircled. But on the heights of Rivoli Plateau, he sees what others do not, a pattern amid the chaos. He turns to his staff and says calmly, "They attack on all sides, which means their strength is divided." The Austrian trap, meant to destroy him, is about to become his greatest opportunity. At 11 a.m., Napoleon orders his counterstroke. He rides to the center, snow swirling around his horse, his voice cutting through the roar of cannon. Massena to the left, Joubert hold the heights, the 18th of the line forward with the bayonet. Trumpets blare, drums roll like thunder. Across the plateau, French columns begin to move, not retreating, but advancing. From the cliffs of Monte Baldo, the French artillery opens fire. 20 guns unleash their fury in perfect unison, their thunder rolling through the valley like the wings of an eagle. The Austrian advance falters, men dropping their muskets as explosions tear through their ranks. Napoleon seizes the moment. He gallops toward the left flank, where Massena's division clashes hand-to-hand in the snow. Sabers gleam, bayonets clash, and the air fills with screams and smoke. Massena's men surge forward, pushing the Austrians back toward the ravines. Bonaparte watches, nodding once. Good. Now we strike the center. At the same moment, on the plateau above San Marco, Joubert's exhausted soldiers form a thin, trembling line. They have been fighting for 6 hours without rest. Austrian drums thunder below, and Lusignan's column appears through the mist, a wall of white coats climbing the slope. Napoleon rides up to the ridge himself. He dismounts, grabs a musket from a fallen soldier, and stands beside Joubert's men. "Soldiers, you have stood for France, now France stands with you." A cheer erupts along the line. The Austrians charge, but the French unleash a storm of fire. Volley after volley tear through the snow and smoke. When the powder runs low, they fix bayonets. The plateau becomes a furnace of steel and blood. By noon, the tide has turned.
Austrian columns, once unstoppable, begin to break apart under the relentless French counterattack. Napoleon sees the gap forming in their center. He signals his reserve, Victor's brigade, hidden until now behind the ridge. The drums beat faster. The French pour through the gap like water through ice. At the same time, Napoleon sends word to Leclerc's artillery, "Turn your guns on their retreat. Do not let them breathe." The order is obeyed without hesitation. Cannon fire sweeps the valley. Austrian formations crumble, their banners swallowed in smoke. From the cliffs above, Napoleon watches his army surge forward. Snow blows around him like the wings of a bird. He lowers his telescope, his eyes bright with cold fire. They are finished. The eagles of France have taken flight. The battlefield glows red beneath the winter sun, a storm of steel, smoke, and courage. By 1 p.m., the enemy's center is gone. Napoleon, calm amid chaos, turns to his aides. "Now, gentlemen, we hunt the remnants." The counterstroke has become a rout. The army of Italy, against all odds, has seized the heights, and with them, the victory.
January 15th, 1797. The guns at Rivoli have fallen silent. The snow still smolders with smoke, and the wind carries the scent of powder and death. From the heights of the plateau, Napoleon watches the Austrian army retreat into the mists of the Adige. Below, the valley is carpeted with broken banners, shattered cannon wheels, and frozen bodies. The Battle of Rivoli is over. The legend has begun. But there is one more shadow yet to fall. The fortress city of Mantua, still holding out after 9 months of siege. Inside its walls, Marshal Dagobert von Wurmser, once a hero of the empire, now commands little more than ghosts. Out of 30,000 men, barely 8,000 remain. They are starving, fevered, and dying by the hundreds each day. Horses are eaten, dogs vanish. Even the leather from saddles and belts is boiled for food. The once proud Austrian banners now hang in tatters from the ramparts, frozen stiff in the winter wind. Yet still, Wurmser refuses to surrender. He walks the ramparts each morning, his sword dragging faintly across the stones, muttering, "Honor does not starve." Beyond the walls, the French army encircles Mantua like a steel ring. Fires glow along the horizon, their smoke rising into the gray January sky. Among the lines, Bonaparte rides in silence, his eyes fixed on the distant city. "It ends here," he says softly. "Italy will be ours." He orders the batteries to fire. One by one, French cannon roar to life, their shells arching through the mist to crash against Mantua's walls. The sound rolls like thunder across the plain, the sound of an empire being born. Inside, the Austrians hold on as long as men can. The hospitals overflow. The moats freeze over with corpses beneath the ice. Officers burn their uniforms for heat. No reinforcements come. No messages arrive. At last, Wurmser calls his aides. They stand in the flickering light of a single candle. He removes his sword belt, lays it on the table, and says quietly, "Tell General Bonaparte that an old soldier yields only to hunger, not to fear." February 2nd, 1797. The gates of Mantua open. French troops march in silence through the snow, their boots echoing in the empty streets. Wurmser rides out in full uniform, his sword gleaming faintly in the gray light. Napoleon salutes him. "Marshal, France respects your courage."
The old man bows stiffly, eyes hollow but proud. He dismounts, hands his sword to Bonaparte, and whispers, "May fortune favor you, young general, for you will need her." Napoleon accepts the blade, then returns it. "You have served honorably. Keep your sword." For a moment, two generations of war, the old empire and the new, stand face to face in the cold wind. That night, the tricolor flies above Mantua. The siege is over. The Italian campaign is won. And in the stillness of victory, Napoleon writes to Paris, "In 14 months, we have fought 12 battles, captured 100,000 prisoners, and taken 500 cannon. The glory of the Republic is now immortal." But as he sets down his pen, he pauses. Beyond the candlelight, his shadow stretches long across the map, reaching toward Austria, and beyond that, toward Europe itself. The shadow of empire. February 1797. The cannons at Mantua have fallen silent. The tricolor flies above the city walls. After months of hunger, snow, and blood, the war in Italy is over, and Napoleon Bonaparte has emerged victorious. But the young general is not done. The Republic's enemies still stand beyond the Alps, beyond the rivers of northern Italy, in the very heart of the Austrian Empire. Napoleon turns north. His army, tattered and thin, begins its march toward Vienna, across mountains scarred by battle, through villages that have never seen a French uniform before. Behind them, Italy lies conquered. Ahead, the empire waits. The winter snow melts under the first light of spring. Rivers burst with ice. Fields turn from white to gold. As they march, the soldiers of the Army of Italy sing through cracked lips songs of home, songs of the Republic. They are no longer an army of hunger and rags. They are the sword of France. At their head rides Bonaparte, his uniform worn, his boots muddied, but his gaze unyielding. He knows every mile they march now is history being written. Across the Alps, panic grips the Austrian court. Reports flood Vienna, Bonaparte unstoppable, cities surrendering without a fight, entire garrisons dissolving before his advance. One minister whispers, "This boy fights like he is led by destiny." Another replies, "He is not led by it, he creates it." From Klagenfurt to Leoben, the French advance like a storm. Bridges collapse under their weight. Austrian outposts vanish in fog. Every village bell that once rang for mass now tolls for the approach of France. But amid the triumph, Bonaparte sees beyond the battlefield. He dreams not of glory, but of peace. A peace written on his terms. In a letter to the Directory, he writes, "Let us make peace with honor, for the world has seen enough blood." Even as he writes, his aides hear the rumble of guns to the north. The Austrian army, desperate, broken, is preparing one last defense before Vienna itself. In March, the French reach the banks of the Mur River, just 100 miles from the gates of Vienna. The snow is gone, the rivers swollen, the air heavy with thaw and smoke. Bonaparte stands before his officers. One more victory, and we dine in Vienna. But the victory never comes, for even the emperor now sees the truth. The Habsburg throne trembles. Austria sues for peace. On April 18, 1797, in a small town called Leoben, a treaty is signed. The war is over. Napoleon does not cheer. He walks alone that night, through the quiet Austrian countryside, past rivers that still steam from cannon fire. He stops beneath a tree, watches the moon rise, and whispers, "Europe sleeps, but soon it will awaken under new banners." For the first time, he sees not just the end of a campaign, but the beginning of something far greater, a destiny that will outlive him. When news of Leoben reaches Paris, the streets erupt with joy. The Directory hails him as the savior of the Republic. But in the minds of many, another name is already forming, the Emperor to come. The young general of Italy has conquered more than cities. He has conquered the imagination of Europe. And as spring sunlight breaks over the Alps, the world knows that a legend has been born.